Many of us pray for little things where there isn't much risk. Then there's Joshua, who prayed for big things. I mean really big things. He needed more daylight to defeat an enemy, so he asked God to make the sun stand still. Now that's faith. Today, lessons we can learn from an event that seems to defy the rules of nature. Stay with us as we pay a visit to the Valley of Ajalon. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. We're in a series on getting started right, lessons from the life of Joshua. Join us in Joshua chapter 10 as Dr. Lutzer speaks on Let's Experience the Power of Prayer.
Have you ever thought of how wonderful it would be if God were to fight for you? What a statement. The Lord fighting for you. Can you just imagine it? Trampled down by people, misunderstood, circumstances that are very difficult, and God comes along and takes up your cause and says, I will fight in your behalf. And basically all that you have to do is to kind of stand by and watch God do it. Watch God do all the things that you always thought He should but didn't, and now He takes up your cause and He fights in your behalf. Of course, in one sense, God is always doing that, isn't He? If He were not fighting for His people, we'd have been devoured by the devil long ago. Sin would have corroded our character in such a way that we would never recover, were it not for the fact that God is for us. How wonderful it would be, though, if God did more than that. If He just came from heaven and just said, I'm here to fight on your behalf. Israel had that experience in the 10th chapter of the book of Joshua. If you turn there for a moment, I want you to notice the text for the day. Joshua chapter 10, they've gone through a difficult experience, as we'll mention in a moment, and now we come to one of the most dramatic passages in the entire Bible. You'll notice I'm going to pick up the text in verse 12 of chapter 10. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, and I love this, and I think you do too, O sun, stand still over Gibeon, O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. It is written in the book of Jasher, a book that we don't have today, but there were other books that were written during the time of Joshua. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since. I love this even more. When the Lord listened to a man. And now we have the text for the day, folks. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. I'd say, yeah, I think so. The Lord was fighting for Israel. What I'd like to do is to paint the context, and then we're going to, of course, relate it to ourselves. But the context is that Joshua made a treaty with the Gibeonites, which he should never have made. If you were with us last time, you know that he made an unwise decision, and we spoke on the topic of making the best of a bad decision. But nevertheless, he made it, and so he kept it. Now you have a coalition of 5 kings that are gathering together to fight against the Gibeonites, and Joshua has no choice. His integrity is at stake. He has no choice but to make sure that he defends the Gibeonites and fights on their behalf. These 5 kings, they gathered, chapter 10, verse 1 says, Now Adonai Tzedek. If I remember my Hebrew correctly, Adonai, of course, is the Lord, and Tzedek is king. He's taking the name of the Lord as such, but of course he's a pagan king, and he gets 4 other kings to go with him, making a total of 5, and they said, we're going to go up and we're going to fight against the Gibeonites, and so Joshua, painted into a corner, has to fight on the behalf of those with whom he made the treaty. So that's the context. Now, what I'd like us to do is to look at this passage and ask this question. What kind of a prayer did Joshua pray that made God come and fight for Israel? Because isn't it true that you want God to fight for you? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the Lord came and took over your cause and held your side of the argument and the bargain? What kind of a prayer did Joshua pray to get this kind of a response from God? The kind of response that says that the Lord listened to the voice of a man. First of all, I want you to know that Joshua prayed with a promise. He prayed with a promise. You'll notice it says in verse 7, Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. Now there's something to hang on to. Chapter 1, God had said, all the place where the sole of your foot treads, I have given that to you. And here God reiterates the promise and says, don't be afraid, Joshua. I have given them into your hand. If you have the faith to believe it, it is a done deal. It is over with. I am the Lord, and I'm doing as I will in this battle, and I want you to know that they are going to be yours. Now, Joshua had this promise, you see. Just as you and I, as we shall see, we need some promises to hang on to. The question is, which promises can we hang on to for what? And that's a big study in Scripture, one that really should necessitate a series of messages. Because oftentimes we want to take promises out of contexts that don't even apply to us. For example, this promise does not apply to us. This was a specific promise given to Joshua in that context. It doesn't mean that we as the United States of America can claim this promise if we were in a war. It doesn't mean that you and I can necessarily claim this promise and say that this is ours. We have other promises that we can claim. This one is for Joshua, and once he heard it, he began to apply it. Now there's a parenthesis here. I want to say that not only was it necessary for Joshua to have this promise, but he needed to pray with a pure heart. Remember earlier in the case of Achan, when he took something and hid it